You're seeing it right here via virtual reality. That's right. Just because the reality is virtual doesn't mean that you're not. I presume that you are, because you're tuned in right here, right now, to this, the latest installment of the ANTiSEEN Shoot interview series hosted by moi, Malcolm Tent from Danbury, Connecticut, Minister of Propaganda for ANTiSEEN Incorporated, current bass man, the strummer of the Thunder Lumber, and conductor of the long-running, some might say never-ending Shoot interview series, where I round up all the various alum from the almighty ANTiSEEN. I'm going to mention very quickly that I've got a plug. There's always a plug. I know it. You know it. I love it. You love it. Always a plug. And I don't mean the type that I could use on the top of my head. No, I mean product. Because product is what makes the world go round. We talked about this one last time we had, I'm not going to say his name yet. You already know, but last time we had Mad Brother Ward in the hot seat. We did a very long and engaging and interesting infomercial for this, the hyper limited edition lo-fi monophonic hand-lathed, each one of a kind reissue of Hated by All. Originally released the better part of 30 years ago, out of print for almost 30 years, but now reissued in a special made in USA transparent hand-cut 45, made by a genuine living, breathing American craftsman in Tennessee. Each one cut in real time. There's only 42 of these things, man. They come packaged in original unused sleeves, and each one has an original unused Mad Brother Ward insert. And not to mention a very charming and collectible certificate of authenticity, which has my handwriting on every single one of them. That's how you know it's over the top, Jack. It's not just good, it's essential. So we got them. You better get them, because once they're gone, they are gone. G-O-N, gone. Contact me personally, or look up my fabulous label TPOS, that's T-P-O-S, on Discogs and eBay and all that, and score yourself a copy of the Mad Brother Ward Hated by All, hyper limited edition lo-fi monophonic reissue, courtesy of me, for you, and also courtesy of our guest today in the hot seat, back for his second heaping helping of punishment, Mr. Mad Brother Ward.
That's right, Big Daddy.
Good to have you on board, Mad Brother. You just blew the audio out on this thing entirely. I congratulate you for that.
Oh, all right. Is it better now?
Well, it's not blown out. It's better, but you know, we got you.
Yeah. All right. I'll try to talk softly then.
Yeah, just whisper.
I'll whisper.
Let the people lean in and hear you a little bit.
I gotta study. Make them study. How is it for real? Is the audio okay?
Yeah, it's great, man. It's fine. I think if anybody's got complaints, they're out of luck. There's nothing they can do about it, man.
I'm not tech savvy. I don't do this sort of stuff real well, so I'm lucky to even be connected here.
Yeah, no, and connected is what these people are going to be now with some great information. Last time we did the Shoot interview, we covered your entire prehistory as Mad Brother Ward and the Screamin' Street Trash. It, of course, ties in with the product. In case y'all didn't see it enough 2 minutes ago, the entire history of Mad Brother Ward and the Screamin' Street Trash, which kind of plows the field for your involvement with ANTiSEEN, because there's a lot of ANTiSEEN involvement with this one. Jeff Clayton, Greg Clayton, myself, yourself. So all these threads are being woven together, but there's still more to the story, because while Matt Brother Ward and the Screaming Street Trash were happening, you were already in the orbit of ANTiSEEN. So maybe you could give us the story behind that.
Well, let's see. If to really go back, you'd have to go back to the spring of '89. Yeah, it's 30 plus years now, so it's kind of a blur. I had a buddy in high school that turned me onto the punk rock thing pretty late. So I was about, let's see, summer of '89. That would have been 17. So I was just getting, he was passing me these records. And, and I'm not ashamed to admit, I mean, I'm a product of my generation. There was a large kind of contingent that probably got turned on to the punk rock thing via that Metallica cover of the Misfits. And I was one of them. But at that same time, that first Danzig record had came out, and I was completely unaware that Glenn Danzig was the singer of the Misfits. Didn't know. And he was the guy that was connecting the dots. So, well, if you like that, you'll like this, And prior to that, my knowledge of punk rock was pretty negative. I can remember even as far back as when I was about 10, seeing an article in our local paper about punk rock, and it just all looked scary, and and looking back at it, I think that's ironically what became very appealing about it once I got a little bit older. But I just sort of dismissed it all and missed a lot of otherwise really cool stuff, because I kind of grew up in that era of that kind of last gasp of hardcore or whatever, and I just missed it completely.
Mm-hmm. And let's just a little bit more background. Where geographically were you when you were finding all this out?
Well, it switches. Initially, I was in Roanoke, Virginia, which is where I'm from. Then we moved for 2 years to Norfolk, Virginia, or just outside of Norfolk, which Norfolk is geographically concentrated with Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads, Newport News, Suffolk, and Chesapeake. They call that whole region the Tidewater region. So it's really almost like a one big giant city. And so it was there that I first, they have a famous skateboard park there called Mount Trashmore. So there was a much more of a prevalent punk rock thing happening there. And, that was just a bad time for me to try to even patch into anything. So, I missed that completely while I was there. I was much more aware of it, but I just sort of just tuned it out because I was, little junior league Johnny Metalhead or wannabe. And I really got disenfranchised with music all through that era, particularly the late 80s once we moved to Charlotte. And, that was for the rise of the hair bands and all that sort of stuff. And that just didn't really appeal to me. I didn't like any of that stuff, and felt really disenfranchised and disconnected from what was going on. And just fell in with this kid at school who was like, well, you might like this stuff. So he started letting me check out these records. And one of the records he let me borrow was EP Royalty by ANTiSEEN. And I had already heard of ANTiSEEN through the local paper. I just saw their name, and it jumped off the page because it was such a weird name. And so I can remember very clearly, and I've told this story before, but I remember I went to my first punk rock show. I remember this one particular night where he gave me that record to borrow, and I took that home after that show, and I'm already kind of, energized from seeing this show, and because I was completely unaware of like all ages, I thought clubs were places that like college kids went to go see wet t-shirt contests, right? I had no fucking clue about anything. So that was a big eye-opening experience because I went to this show and it was all kids basically, and it was almost ran by kids. I mean, the guy that was running the place had to have been couldn't have been 25, So it was kind of like, that was pretty eye-opening. And I got home with this record, and I'm still living with my parents. So I'm like sneaking up, they're asleep. And I go into my room, and I have to play the volume real low on the record, right? But, it's so hot, it's so loud anyway. And, man, I must have listened to that thing 10 times just that night, over and over, and just staring at the record cover, trying to figure out, what all this was and what it meant, because it was so different from the other stuff that I had been given to borrow. I'd heard The Exploited, Agnostic Front. These were like early favorites because they were the first things I heard. And but this was completely different, because you could tell by looking at the record that these guys weren't like, it wasn't like colored hair or mohawks or studded leather or any of that stuff. And I'm not knocking any of that stuff. That's all fine and cool. But ANTiSEEN was not that. And I found it a lot more relevant to my experience and my way of thinking. So I got really I zeroed in on that. I was really interested in what this was and what it was all about. And I tried to go see them that summer, which was the first night of their first tour, which I think y'all have been talking about, when they came up when they did the recording with you in Danbury that summer. It came out as the XCI thing. They kicked off that tour in Charlotte, and I don't remember why I didn't get to go, but I missed it. I remember being really, really devastated that I missed it. And then finally they came back and played at the end of summer, right as school started, on Labor Day, or that weekend anyway. And that's when I first saw them. And that was the real, and I've said this before, it's cliche, it sounds silly, but it's like a life-changing moment where everything that I knew was going to be erased. It was over. There was no going back. There was no, everything. My friends, everything, just all this, I had turned a corner, all on this one night. And I actually still got the flyer. That's the only thing I got to show.
Wow.
This is the flyer from the first show I ever saw.
Wow.
September 1st, 1989.
Slam Chowder.
Slam Chowder technically qualifies as the first punk band I ever saw, because the show that I had seen the previous spring, that first punk rock show I went, they were one of the bands that played. They were the first band that, it was 3 bands, that kind of deal. But I never ever heard or saw those guys ever again. I don't know whatever happened to them, but that's...
I was going to say, that's a name that's kind of lost to the mists of history.
It's pretty common for Charlotte. There's a lot of bands that pop up and they become very popular for about a year, and then where do they go?
Right.
And the next thing you know, they're playing some other complete type of music, and they've, it's like
become a Red Hot Chili Peppers cover band or whatever.
I don't know what they go do. I got a kid mad once about 15 years ago, and he was just like, "You think you're so great, blah, blah, blah," and all this. I'm like, no, it's just that, I know you kids. I've seen you come and go, and you're not going to even be doing this a year from now. You're going to be playing in some indie rock band or some bullshit like that. No, fuck you, man. This is for life, man, blah, blah, blah. A year later, he's playing in an indie rock band. And it was even better. The band was called Yard Work.
Ooh, now how's that for sort of a... viewing into one's future in music?
You can see it, and you can call it, I don't know, but whatever. So that was, as far as Slim Chowder, they kind of, they disappeared. I remember liking them though. I thought they were cool, but I couldn't tell you anything other, I couldn't even tell you what they looked like. But at the time, I had no other, frame of reference, so it was all eye-opening, it was all exciting, it was all new. So I was kind of just absorbing it all at that point. But ANTiSEEN was where I really started going, okay, this is my thing. This is me. Because like I said, it wasn't the convoluted kind of posing with the hair and the clothes and the fashion. They looked like, blue collar, which they were, just blue collar guys. And I missed that whole era when they were still doing the theatric stuff, when they had the dummy heads and the smoke bombs and the fake blood or whatever. By the point I saw them, it was just the band, and if there was any blood, it was going to be real blood, And that was real eye-opening, too, to see Jeff kind of go into his self-destructive mode or whatever. He used to pound his face with the microphone, which I never understood that, but whatever. But it was exciting, I had never seen that. And that first night, man, I'm telling you, and I've told this before, he was throwing himself around, and they were playing at this club in Charlotte called the Milestone, which is still here, and the stage is only like a foot off the floor. So it wasn't even like he was doing stage dives, but he would just sort of fling himself, and regardless whether or not anyone caught him or not. And I remember he landed in this big, he just threw himself and no one caught him. He just went boom on the floor. And he was like right in front of me. And I'm like, what do I do? Do I help this guy up? Or if I do, is he going to punch me? So it was scary. And that was part of, I think, going back to what I initially felt when I was a kid, that punk rock was scary. And I think once I got into it, it didn't seem quite so scary until I saw this band who were really kind of confrontational. Not like in the same way as like G.G. Allen. They weren't causing fights or, anything like that, but just that sheer force, that presence they had. And, it was a little intimidating. And, I was just completely taken with it and thought it was about the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So, that started the journey. I started trying to, I just obsessed over it. I just started trying to, find anything I could about them. And, were you going to say something? Question?
Wow, it's clairvoyant. I'm sitting here and I haven't said a word, but yes, I was going to clarify the lineup that you saw. I'm going to guess it was the Clayton Young, Throgmorton, O'Keefe lineup.
Right.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, the night they played this show that I saw, that was the release of the Raw Shit record.
Right.
And I don't know that it was billed as a release, but they had that record, and that was the first time they were selling it, was that night. So, but it seemed like they had an impossible amount of records out. And that was the other thing that was kind of curious about them in that era. And I know this is kind of hard for people to understand now, but particularly for Charlotte in that time, the fact that they had vinyl records that they had done that was their records was just seemed like a whole next level thing. That was part of it too. It was like, wow, they make their own records, Who does that?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know any band that had released anything that was, anyone that put out a record to me had already, gone on and they're somebody. They got records. So that was impressive. I got Honor Among Thieves straight away. That was the first one I got. The first song I zeroed in on that record was I Don't Ask You for Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I love that song, and I think my reasoning for buying that was it had the EP royalty songs on it too. So I thought, okay, well, this has got more value. It's got more value for the buck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they were pushing the Blood of Freaks record still. I think I can remember it being on the. I found Repo Records at the same time, and I wasn't aware there was a connection. And I was learning. I was learning everything. I was just kind of finding my way through it because, I didn't have anybody really showing me very much other than, like I said, I had the friend at school, and all he did was just say, "Here, listen to this," But, so I was just discovering everything all in this kind of intense kind of time frame between like the late summer and fall of '89, and that's when I really started discovering that's when I found a magazine at school. I don't know if anyone remembers. There used to be a heavy metal magazine called Rip. Yeah. It was like a glossy, newsstand metal magazine.
Yeah, really, really cheesy logo on the front.
Right, Rip. And there were these metal girls, these heavy metal girls that let me sit with them in the cafeteria at school. And one of them had the Rip magazines, and I would just kind of thumb through them while we were at lunch. And one of them had a letter in it from G.G. Allen, and announcing his suicide.
Oh, man.
And that freaked me out. I was like, what the hell is this? You know? So then I had to figure out, okay, I gotta find what the hell's this guy? You know? No clue that, you know, Gigi and ANTiSEEN knew each other, no clue that there was any connection, none of that. All that I figured out later as I got to know, you know, the band. So, and then I can remember when I found the Gigi Allen records, I was like, not scared. I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to spend the money on this or not, you know? Uh-oh.
It might be a little too extreme.
I disappeared. Do you see me?
Yep, I see. I hear you.
Hang on.
We got the
Sorry about
technical
that.
difficulties, folks.
Yep. All right. So, you know, that's where it gets blurry. I can't rightly say what the next time I saw them was. I know there was a time I tried to go see them, and I went with some other friends, and, you know, they had curfew. They had to get home, and everything was running late. So we only got to see them play like 2 or 3 songs, and then we was like, we got to go. You know, it's just like, fuck. But very shortly thereafter, I just started taking initiative. And if I found out, you know, like I talked about this with Jason Griscom, who some ANTiSEEN fans might recognize his name. He's the guy that made the Come Get Some movie. I don't know how many people have that.
I don't have that. I don't even know what that is.
Oh, really?
Yeah, what is it?
It was a very low budget zombie movie that this guy Jason made, and ANTiSEEN are featured in it.
No way.
Yeah, and but Griscom got into the band just a little before I did, so, and I knew who he was back then, but you know, and that was one weird thing about the Charlotte scene, if you want to call it that, was that it wasn't, at least in my experience, it wasn't very connected. So I would know people from seeing them at shows, but we didn't socialize because it wasn't about socializing. It was about the band. Everything was focused on the band. It wasn't about coming and seeing your friends or chatting up a girl or any of that stuff. It was about the band. You were there to see the band. And once the band was done, there was nothing more here for you. You left. You know, it wasn't a social order. And now I've done forgot the point of what I was going to say.
Charlotte scene, 1989, not social.
Something about Jason. I don't remember.
Oh, Jason Griscom. See, your memory's better than mine.
Yeah. Well. But it's not that good. It's getting old up here, the gray matter.
See, that's why we got to document this stuff now while we can.
Yeah.
Well, I might take advantage.
Anyhow, I just, you know, like I said, I started following him around. Go ahead.
No, it's because I take advantage of this just for 1 second, because there is a point I wanted to bring up when you talked about looking at the cover of NC Royalty and how important it is that, like, that's a record that didn't look like anything else, especially to somebody who's just discovering, you know, punk rock or whatever. Even at that time, most of the punk or whatever that you were going to find was either on a major label or a big indie label, you know, slick, glossy, full color covers, UPC codes maybe. But to have this thing that was, you know, handmade, hand assembled, and even just the way the band looked, like you said earlier, really is, you can't underestimate or undersell just really how important that is. Yeah,
and that was like a big part of the appeal to me. It was that it wasn't, like I said, it was had actual vinyl records, but you could tell it was all very lo-fi. You know, it was wasn't a big budget behind it, but that was appealing. I just thought, you know, it gave the whole thing a lot more character, and you know, I just, like I said, I sort of kind of got obsessed with it and tried to get all my friends in on it. That was part, like I said, I was turning the corner and they weren't going to keep up with me. I can remember playing it I had a cassette, and I was playing it for some friends in their car, and the guy looks at me and he goes, "Is the guitar supposed to sound like that?" And that was important. I'm glad that I had that moment, because I realized then that I had an awareness and an appreciation for something that they didn't, and that they would never understand. And I had opened a door to a new level of, I don't know how to say it. I'm better at writing than talking. But it was important that I was becoming aware that there was a lot more to be done with this kind of music than just your normal MTV garden variety cock metal bullshit,
Yeah,
and I just could never go back to that ever again. So I started following them. Anytime if I could find out, that's what I was going to say. I can remember how exciting it was when you'd go to the record store and you'd see a flyer in the window announcing their next show. And it was just like, oh, they're going to play again, And you come to look forward to that, because it was, it was a very important night, But it got to where that wasn't enough. If I could find out they were playing somewhere else, in the region or in the state or something, I would often just hop in my car and follow them. Mm-hmm. And at some point, and I believe it was Tom O'Keefe, who just was like, "Brother, if you're going to follow us, why don't you just ride with us? And you can help load the gear in and blah, blah, blah." And that was huge. That was, to be 18, 19, or however old I was by that point, that was a pretty big deal, because that was kind of like being validated by the absolute coolest people you knew. And at that age, and having come up through the channels that I came up through, which was a very kind of restrictive, had a very uber religious, overbearing kind of upbringing, strict parenting. I mean, I'm not the only one, but all this stuff I had to kind of sneak in, and fly in under the radar. Mom found a bunch of my stuff at one point, and put it all in a trash bag and burned it. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I was up against. So, like, a lot of my flyers and stuff like that, because I started collecting flyers and all that stuff. Yeah, all that stuff got, So, yeah, I started to get to travel with the band some, just as far as like going to like Myrtle Beach, or if they play up, and I can remember going with them to Morganton or places like this. And I got to rewind a bit. I'm skipping because I'm letting all this blur.
That's okay. It's all part of the story, and I'll just take a second to interject that you're still talking about like a couple hours here, a couple hours there. We're not like long actual touring. It's just, a bit of a trip here, a bit of a trip there. You're on that.
Right. Yeah, just like for one night. I can remember, but going back before I even met the guys, the first person I met was Joe Young, because he worked at Repo Records. And Joe, anyone that ever met Joe knew he was very, outgoing and easy to get along with and easy to talk to. And I can remember going in one time and Jeff was there. And Jeff was looking at something. He had his hands like this and he was reading something. And me and my buddies were like, "There he is. There he is. There's Jeff Clayton. Go talk to him." I'm not going to go talk to him. You go talk to him. I'm not going to go talk to him. We were scared to talk to him. And what had ended up happening there was at some point, me and a buddy of mine were talking about doing we wanted to do a little comic book. There was a band that I'm friends with called Fireball XL5, and they had done a little comic book. And it was, real simple. It was like an 8-page, cut and paste kind of deal, real crudely drawn. And I was like, I had seen that and thought, well, my friend Brad, who I talked about in the last thing we played music together, really excellent artist. And I was like, dude, you could draw better pictures than that, and we could probably write something a little cooler, you know? And so we were talking about it. And it was one of those ideas that was a great idea, but we just didn't have the real drive to make it happen. It was better, you know, it was a better idea. It just never happened. Brad drew some drawings just as like ideas of what he might use. They're actually in the Destructo Maximus book somewhere, and they used one of his drawings on the insert. I think it's on the insert for the Psycho Killer record. So you can kind of get an idea of what the drawings would look like if you have that. But that was how we started. We were kind of selling that to Joe, and then Joe was like, well, I'll talk to Jeff and see what he thinks or whatever. And then Jeff called me at home. I gave Joe my number, and Jeff called. Man, that was a big thing back then. That was like, for me, that was like, I don't know, Gene Simmons calling you, it's like, it was just, to me, that was like huge. And I was like, man, Jeff Clayton called me, So, I was just a big fanboy, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. That's, that was where I was at that point in time. And they invited me to go travel with them. And it was, like I said, it was never 2 days in a row. It was just, a show here or a show there. And I got to ride in their van. And that was always fun. My memory of that was, in those days, a lot of times Joe would drive separate. He usually was probably with a girl or something, and they came up in his own car. So more often than not, and I want to say, by that point, it was the transition where Steve Sadler had started playing. And I don't remember him traveling with them too much. Or if he did, he was real quiet. So I don't remember traveling with him, if at all. I just don't remember that. But I think it probably stepped up more after Greg joined, and that's when I started really kind of hitting a lot more shows. And I did my first tour helping them that would have been January of '93 by that point. And that was important because we went on a tour. It was like a 10-day thing across the South, and I had been kicked out of the house, came back home. They let me come back. Was living at home with my parents, and we went off to go do that trip, and I just never came home. And I hadn't planned to not come back home. I just didn't. It was just like when we came back, it was just like, I can't go back. I just can't go back. So, there was a lot going on in that era as far as me and my personal life, and there was just a lot of change. And I think having been exposed to this band and seeing the way they kind of approach things was real heavily influencing me as to how I was approaching things, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah.
So that was kind of how I got, fell in with those guys and got real friendly. It just so happened that when me and Jeff started talking, we just had a lot of similar interests. We both liked pro wrestling. We both liked old Kiss. It was just like, the guy you looked up to also likes all the same nerdy shit you like, and it was like,
Yeah. Just as a bit of an aside, is that the tour where Greg Clayton got you in the figure 4 leg lock?
That is the same tour, yes. The famous Chinese restaurant death match. Yeah. There's different versions of that story.
Well, let's hear yours.
Okay. I mean, it ends the same. The ending's always the same. I won't lie about the ending. So we had gotten into wrestling in the back of the van this whole run down across Florida. And or it was Florida. We were in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, we're at this Chinese restaurant thing. But we were doing it in the van the whole time. Jeff took my sunglasses off and twisted them up, and they broke, and the hinge had hooked out. And he grabbed it and he raked it across my head. So I had these scratches all across my head. And I grabbed them back and threw them out the window, you know. And they were, you know, it was like double teaming on me the whole time. They were just, you know, kind of beating me up, really. And,
So
you know,
the gas chamber express. What more do you expect?
yeah, luckily I did not get put into the gas chamber, but so we go into Tuscaloosa and we go to this Chinese restaurant, and what it is it's just it's a takeout place. So you walk in and there's like 4 tables is all they have. It's a small room, you know, with the window, you know, where you pick up your food with the menu board and all that. And then there's like a hallway that goes down one side, the length of the kitchen, and there's bathrooms in the back. And Greg's like, I gotta go use the bathroom. So he goes down this hallway, and there's enough of a like kind of L to the door kind of thing. Like if you're going down the hallway, and there's this little spot, and it's just about this big, and then there's a wall. They had a trash can there, and they had the plastic trays, you know, that they put your food on, sitting on top of the trash can that, you know, people dump their trash and put the plastic tray on. And I hid over in that corner and I grabbed one of those plastic trays. So when he came back out from the bathroom, he comes walking back and I just go whack as hard as I can right in his face. I was just like, ah! He's just like, oh! And we get into this big wrestling match right there on the floor in front of, you know, the whole kitchen staff come running out and they're all cheering and stuff. And Greg wrestles me down and he puts me in the figure 4 leg lock, right? And he's sitting there going, look at it, Tuscaloosa! Look at it! You know? And I'm just going, no! So, yeah, that was the Chinese death match or whatever.
Whew, man, that's rough.
Well, it was just funny because, you know, like I said, the whole kitchen staff came out. And I don't know if they knew we were playing or not. And I can remember finally getting up, and there was this couple over in the corner, and they were like, you know, it was like shoveling their food in their mouth, like, don't look at us, you know. We'd scared them. But, yeah, that whole trip was a lot of fun. There's a lot of things I can remember from it. I've always wanted to try to sit down and organize my thoughts on it and write a blog because, you know, I keep a running blog of all the shows that I've done, kind of a running tour diary, for lack of a better description. But I wrote about one show. We did a show in Gainesville, Florida, and they played at this place called the Florida Theater. It was this big cavernous room. It had to hold, I think the capacity was like 3,500. It was just gigantic-enormous. And the problem was that same tour, we were in the same town every night as Green Day, who had not yet released their first major label record, but they were right on the, I think it was like 6 months out or something. They were the flavor of the month, and they were just selling out everything. So that was like stiff competition. And so, you know, they were playing some other club, and ANTiSEEN was in this big, gigantic, enormous, huge hall, and there might have been, you know, 50 or 100 people there, but it was like, you know, in that room, it just looked empty. But that was a memorable show because they played their set, and then when they were done, I didn't know they were going to do this. They came back out and just started taking requests, and they played another 30 minutes of unrehearsed songs, just, you know, because everyone, the crowd was so small, but they were really into it. And I remember that left a big impression on me at the time. I just was really impressed that they would do something like that. You know, I just was learning, you know. It was just sort of like paying my dues and learning from guys that had the right approach and the right attitude. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about, you know, social standing of any sort. They were doing this because it was just what they did. And, you know, and so, you know, it left a deep impression, and I was really glad that I got to see a lot of that and be around for a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. So on that tour, were you roadie or were you merch guy?
I was just roadieing. I was just helping load. Back then, I could set up Greg's drums pretty much by myself. And I usually tore them down by myself.
Mm-hmm. Right on. So
I missed a lot of stuff on that tour too. I can remember, you know, Jeff Young would talk girls into taking their tops off or something, you know. And,
I thought you were going to say help break down the drum kit.
No, I was missing all the fun stuff. It was like, oh, where was I? I was loading the drums up.
Right.
Yeah, I just, you know, some of them I get confused if it was that same tour or not. I can remember going to Athens, Georgia. They played at the 40 watt one time, and I can remember. In fact, I can remember this did happen on the tour, but on a separate occasion. But we got met at the door by the crew of the club, going, "We know who you are. We know your reputation, and we're not going to put up with any shit." And we're like, "We just got here, you know." And at the end of the night, every time, they're always like, "Wow, you guys are really professional. We really appreciate that. You can come back anytime," you know.
Okay.
But you're going in, and they're just like, man, they're just giving you all kinds of hell from the word go. And it was, you know.
Well, 40 Watt Club, you know, birthplace of REM. I'm sure they had a certain mindset and a certain, I don't know, preconceived notions about things, probably.
Yeah, I would imagine so. But like I said, but when all was said and done, they recognized that, you know, it's a show. You know, there's a large part of it is a show. I mean, yeah, Jeff's the blood's real and everything, but, you know, there's nothing that's going to get damaged, or if anything would get damaged, it would be done inadvertently, and obviously the band would pay for it. So there wasn't, you know, we didn't have a lot of issues like that. I say we. It's probably not fair for me to say that. It's they. But, you know, I can remember we had that problem in a club in Florida. And I remember they had the microphones wrapped in saran wrap and stuff like that. Yeah.
Like it's like a G.G. Allen show.
Yeah, yeah. They was like, oh, I don't want you to get blood all over everything. So, yeah, that was, you know, and going back, like I said, I got to meet Gigi through the band at that point. Gigi would come to town and just hang out. And so, you know, he wasn't coming to Charlotte to play. He was coming to kind of get away from things, and he'd come for like a week or 10 days or something. So I got to meet him, and that was cool. I saw him in Atlanta. I saw a show in Atlanta, and which is on one of the DVDs they put out. Jeff Young filmed that. That was, you know, that was really cool. I got a really good pep talk. Did I tell that story?
I don't know if you've ever told it on video, but it's a good one.
Yeah, so we went to Atlanta to see him on Valentine's Day, 92. And he had played a couple of months before. When he was going to do the thing with Dee Dee Ramone, and that didn't happen or whatever. I don't remember what the deal was on that. I didn't get to go to see that show, and it didn't matter because Dee Dee wasn't there anyway, but still would have liked to have gone. But so we go to Atlanta. Oh, here's what I can tell you I can remember. I show up that afternoon over at Jeff's house, and he's on the phone. He gets off the phone. He goes, "Hey, man, you can play drums, right?" Because I had played drums with my first band for one show. The very first show I ever played, I was playing drums. And I'm like, "Yeah, I kind of can play. I'm not good." But he's like, "Well, they got arrested last night, and Dino's in jail, and they need a drummer." And I was like, "Oh, God. You can't be serious." You know? I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." You know? But luckily, that didn't happen. They found somebody down there who was really, really good. And I can only imagine that had that happened, it would not have ended well. This whole story might even not even, we might not be talking about Russ Ward at all, other than, remember that dumbass that we took to Atlanta and tried to get to play for Gigi for a night? So that didn't happen. But I can remember that was the first thing where I started getting really scared. And I was getting more and more anxious on the way down there because, you know, you don't know what you're going to get, you know. I'd always heard about Gigi, and I knew the reputation, and I knew the stories, and I didn't know what to expect, but was super excited to go see it. And we got to go backstage because, obviously, you know, they were all friends. And I was with my friend Brad, and we went back there, and I can remember thinking in my head, you know, because we'd already gotten banned at a club in Charlotte, and we thought we were pretty badass little punk rock wannabes, you know, but we thought we were cool. But we got down there and realized real fast We were white meat, baby-faced virgins lost in the woods. And I'm sure we thought we were sitting there, you know, in this backstage going, but I'm sure the reality was more like, you know what I mean? And after the show, I'm pretty sure it was after they played, you know, we were told where to stand, you know, whatever you do, do not leave this spot, kind of a thing. And Gigi didn't do any of his really wild stuff. He didn't shit on stage or nothing like that night. But it was still a really exciting show. It was a lot of fun. And the band was great. I mean, that band, that lineup was a really great, that was like such a great band. That was when he had Bill Weber. Dino didn't play that night. They had a guy filling in. And I think his claim to fame had been that he had played with Johnny Thunders at some point or something, or so the rumor was. I can't remember exactly, but he really did great, and that band was they were just so goddamn good. And sitting backstage again, and all these people, you know, flooded into this room, and me and Brad are kind of sitting out of the way, and I'm just trying to mind my business and, you know, stay out of the way and not say nothing. And somebody brings this big stack of pizzas, and they set them down right next to us. And man, it smelled so good. And we were starving because we hadn't ate, you know. And we were just like, oh man, I want a piece of that pizza so bad. And we were like, no way, I'm not touching it. And then the next thing I know, here comes Gigi, right? Comes over, you know, kneels down beside us or whatever, and just like, hey, you guys better eat some of this pizza because I can't eat it all. You know, like the most, you know, not something you would expect this guy to say. So we're eating pizza, and he's sitting there talking to us, and he's like, yeah, Jeff told me about your band, you know, and because we had just gotten, you know, like I said, we got banned out of this club, caused all this ruckus, and Jeff had told him about it, and he was like, man, you know, don't ever let him tell you what to do, you know. He was just kind of, you know, do what you do. And I can remember the one thing I remember him saying was, do what you do. Don't do what I do. Do what you do. And do it, you know, at 100%, you know. I remember him going, do it hard. You know, that New England accent. And I just, you know, that was a huge thing to have him kind of, you know, I'm like, I look back at it and go, God damn, Gigi Allen gave me a pep talk. It's fucking weird. You would never expect that. And it was fucking cool, and it just, you know, it meant a lot. It was a cool thing. And, you know, I got 2 autographs the whole time I ever was around them, and they're both gone. I don't have anything to show for it. I've got no pictures. I think that's one reason why he was always cool to me, was that I didn't come up to him with a pen or a camera, you know. I wasn't always like, hey, do this for me. Can you sign this for me? Or nothing like that. It was never that. So I think that's one reason why he was cool to me. I don't know. I gave him a Ramones t-shirt, and I was surprised to see it pop up in that new documentary that, well, I forget, what's that movie called? All in the Family?
One Hell of a Family.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a point where he has it out. It's like this acid wash Ramones t-shirt. I bought that at Myrtle Beach, showed up over at Jeff's one day, and Gigi was there. He's like, oh, give me that shirt. I got to have that shirt. You know, I was like, okay, here you go. You know. And he gave me a shirt, and so we traded. And I don't even have that anymore. So, but, you know, that was fun. That was cool to have that experience and to be able to say I got to do that. I got to meet Jeff Dahl when he came down to help do that Eat More Possum record. That was really cool. And got to see him play. He got up and played with him at a show, and that was really, really, really fucking cool.
Yeah, there's video of that one floating around too.
Not good video. Yeah, it's not good video, but I'd still like to see it. Even just to pull the audio off of it. And I don't know how good the audio is on it, but I remember they played I Don't Care by the Ramones, and they played Two-Headed Dog, and I can't remember what else they played. But yeah, that was you know, feel lucky to have seen that. You know, it just sort of starts blurring together. The 10th anniversary, I can remember that happening. That was a big thing.
Yep, that was a good one. That was the first time the Murder Junkies played without Gigi, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. They got up and did that with Jeff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jeff Clayton's debut with the Murder Junkies and ANTiSEEN's 10th anniversary, and you're on hand and you're slowly working your way through the ranks of the ANTiSEEN corporate structure.
Yeah, I guess if that's how you want to classify that.
Because by now this is like October of '93, so you've already been in the orbit for a little while now.
Yeah, and then Jeff was helping me, you know, and I was doing the Mad Brother Ward thing, and Greg was helping me, and so I think, and then we got sideways. There was a point there around 95, I think, maybe in 96, and we got sideways. And I don't know, I really can't say why or how. I think it had a lot to do with just, I was kind of enjoying a certain amount of what I felt was success with my records and my shows and doing my thing. And I probably was not attitudinally adjusted at that point. And at the same time, I think, you know, Jeff was experiencing the biggest at that point, you know, as big as they had. I mean, they had gone. I had seen the arc where they went from being this sort of curious little bastard band in Charlotte music to being the biggest band in Charlotte. And it was a weird arc because, and a lot of that was predicated on the fact that you had the rise of the grunge thing, and that kind of music became more, there was more of an awareness for that kind of music. I won't say it was commercially successful, but, you know, a band like ANTiSEEN I don't think was ever going to be commercially successful, but the appreciation for it, their fan base, you know, greatly expanded in that time period. People that would not have listened to them in 1988 or 89 were coming to see them in 1995, and they understood it then because now there was a frame of reference via the grunge thing that allowed for people to go, oh, okay, you know, that they might, you know, where it just seemed like this complete alien music not 5 years before. So they had gotten really, really, really big, and they would sell out every show they did here in Charlotte. And, you know, it was just a lot of misunderstanding. You know, well, Russ said this. Well, Jeff said that, you know. And it really wasn't that Russ said this or Jeff said that. Russ might have said something that got turned into this, and Jeff might have said something that got turned into that, you know. And so we just got sideways with each other. And, you know, I regret that. And so we didn't talk for a couple of years after that. And I went through some stuff, and Jeff went through some stuff in our personal lives, kind of into, you know, unconscious. We were semi-conscious of each other's stuff because, you know, we had that friendship or whatever, but, you know, like I said, we weren't really speaking. And, you know, Jeff got divorced and I got divorced, and, you know, it was just that kind of whirlwind stuff. And I finally, a friend of mine was like, you know, he was asking about you. And he just goes, man, I hope he's doing okay. And I was like, well, I tell him I hope he's doing okay. That's how I remember it anyway. And they go, and it was like, well, why don't you go watch them play? They're playing at this point, there was a club called Tremont that had came up in Charlotte, the Tremont Music Hall. And he goes, well, why don't you come see him? And I'm like, okay. And I was real scared to do that because we hadn't talked for like 2 or 3 years or whatever it was at that point. And I remember him walking up, and he stopped when he saw me. And I was just like, well, so do you want to hit me or do you want to hug me? And he gave me a hug. And man, I can't tell you how much that meant to me at that point, you know. And that kind of, and then you know, the ice was melting, and I was coming around more. And I remember telling another friend of mine around that time, I'm like, I'm glad that, you know, we got to put all that shit behind us. You know, I'm glad that, you know, I can rebuild this friendship with him. but I'm never going to get as involved as I was.
Yeah, right.
I'm never going to get as involved as I was.
Oh, no.
Never going to do that again.
Oh, never, never, never. Well, you
And,
know what? At this point, I just got to say, this is a really good point because we're at the 60-minute mark and we've reached a certain historical juncture. So we're going to let the power of suspense carry us over into the next episode of the ANTiSEEN Shoot interview series, which will pick up from where you and Jeff have hugged and made up, and you're never going to get that deep into ANTiSEEN ever again. But as we know, life is full of strange twists and turns.
Everywhere I go, everyone's got a big butt. Next time we can talk about my big butt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll put that on the to-do list. Everybody who's watching now, I put it on the to-do list. You saw me virtually put it on the to-do list, so we'll do that. We'll do that. So yeah, we'll just say in conclusion, Russ, another great episode of the Shoot interview series. Thanks for regaling us.
Well, thanks for having me.
And we got plenty more, so you people have a lot of incentive to keep tuning in, because I have a feeling that the Mad Brother Ward is not quite done yet. So, remember, the Hated by All special lo-fi limited edition, only 42 made. Get it from me, Malcolm Tent, on Facebook and Discogs and YouTube and all that jive. Get it on Discogs, get it on eBay. Just get it. Just get it. That's my only piece of advice to you for right now, other than tune in for more awesome stories from Mad Brother Ward on the ANTiSEEN Shoot interview series. So until we meet again, this is Malcolm Tent saying so long from the Nutmeg State.